What is up, Formula One race fans? It's James from the Formula One Bros, and welcome to a new season of our podcast. This is coming right after watching the Australian Grand Prix race. I did not watch it live because it was in the middle of the night, so I watched the rerun this morning. And there's a lot that I want to talk about with this race. First off, it's just so incredibly nice to have Formula One back. Yeah, I've missed it in the off season, and it is really great to be back. So let's dive into a pretty eventful Australian Grand Prix. The first thing I want to talk about on my list is obviously the thing that everyone's been talking about this week, and that is the regulations. Um, there was a lot of mixed feelings, I think, coming out of this race weekend about the regulations. I wrote down some pros, some cons. Right now, I think the cons are definitely outweighing the pros right now. But I'll talk about how this could change in the future. But I'm going to start with the cons. I'm going to start with the things that I think aren't that great about it. From the driver's point of view, a lot of drivers have been saying that they're incredibly complicated. They're just they're very difficult to drive. That's difficult to manage. And in terms of the team perspective, they're having a hard time kind of figuring out the whole battery thing. So that's the first layer to it. As a fan, watching and especially watching the onboards when they're going through the really fast section up to turn 9. A lot of times you'll see drivers the cars go from over 300 kph down to like 250 just because they're lifting off to recharge the battery, just so that way they can just get to the end of the lap with the battery that they need. So from a fan's perspective, it's really it's kind of taken a lot of the magic and fun about Formula One, and it just seems like they're just managing battery, which that's not really what this sport is about. So as a fan watching it, it kind of takes some of the magic away, if I'm being completely honest. And I think that was a lot of what the sentiment from fans, from videos that I've seen, from people talking online that I've seen on, TikTok, on Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. From what I've seen, that's a lot of the overall arching sentiment about these new regulations. It's just, yeah, and I agree with the sentiment of it's kind of taking the magic away from the sport a little bit. Um, which I mean, those are pretty big cons. Some of the pros, as if you are a casual fan turning on the Australian Formula One race, you knew that there were new regulations, but didn't really know a whole lot about like what exactly they were. Um, and I think even some of the more hardcore fans like me, honestly, when it came to race time, I thoroughly enjoyed the racing. Um, I thought both the aerodynamic aspect of the regulation changes and the battery aspect of the regulation changes made for some really great racing. There was a lot of speculation going into this race that it wasn't going to create a lot of great racing. But it seemed like the drivers were able to follow a lot better. Which, I mean, an example of that, look at Charles and George's battle up at the front. They were following really closely for a large number of laps before George ended up pitting. So that battle up at the front was really great. And so I think it was a lot easier to follow. I mean, you're always going to have points. I don't think there's ever going to be a car that's developed that is perfectly balanced and aerodynamically created to make it so that way it's completely easy and effortless to follow. I don't think that'll ever happen. But I think it was definitely it looked from the fans' perspective watching the race that it was a lot easier to follow, which I really appreciated. I really appreciated that. It also looked a lot easier for passing too. I think the battery and the deployment made for some really great passing opportunities. I mean, Max, granted, It is Max Verstappen we're talking about, but he started at the back because he got knocked out in Q1 due to his crash. He cut his way up through the field, and by no time he was, fifth place, um, purely just from passing drivers. So I think that is we've seen in the past, even drivers like Max Verstappen in a Red Bull get stuck in a train and you can't go anywhere. So I think with him passing, being able to make his way through the field, I think that's a great example that passing has become a lot easier. And even going back to Charles and George, not only were they following close, the lead changed hands quite a few times, and we haven't seen that a whole lot in Formula One racing in recent years. So I think those are some of the big pros about these new regulations for sure. Um, Now, this is just one race, it's one track. But so far, I say so good with the new regulations. Now, in terms of with these regulations, in terms of like the cons that I mentioned before, I do think things will get better. In every regulation change, big new era, it's always started off, kind of rough. When you went from 2013 to 2014, the cars were a lot slower with the V6 hybrid, turbo hybrid power units that were brand new in 2014. The racing was a lot slower. I mean, even in the first race in Bahrain, yeah, Lewis and Nico Rosberg were off in their own world, but overall, the racing was a lot slower than it was in 2013 than those blown diffuser V8 cars that they were racing in before. So I think before we say, oh, these regulations suck, they're terrible, it's bad, let's let the teams, develop the electrical side of things, develop the battery, develop the cars a little bit and see what they can do before we totally judge based off of just one winter test and one race weekend. So let's not say that these are a total failure just yet. I think they will get better. As the teams start to understand it more, they'll develop and it will get better and easier to manage. All right, so let's move on to the actual racing. Starting off, Mercedes. Wow. They are clearly the front runners of this Formula One grid so far. They had an amazing race from the get go. With George, with George and Charles's battle, it was looking really close for a minute, but as soon as George pit, and then he was able to catch up to the Ferraris before they pit, the second half of the race, they were in complete control of the race. And after the two Ferraris pit, they weren't able to really gain any ground on Mercedes all that much. And they just completely controlled the race to the end. And a really, really magnificent 1-2 from George and Kimi. That's how it started. George and Kimi 1-2, and that's how it ended. George and Kimi 1-2. They had an amazing race. This is the dream that Mercedes could have started this season. So way to go for Mercedes, way to go for George Russell getting his first win and his first time leading the championship. So way to go, George. Big George Russell fans here, sir. Really, really great. Now, speaking of can't talk about Mercedes without how well Ferrari looked, with how good Ferrari looked. Now, Ferrari at the start of this race, they looked phenomenal. I mean, Charles and George's battle was one of the most fun things that I've gotten to watch in Formula One racing in a while. Last season was pretty boring, and as a Ferrari fan, it was demoralizing. Man, that battle was just so much fun. The first, 15 laps or so until George pitted, that was just so fun. And it really does look like with Ferrari this year, I don't think they're as far off from Mercedes as I think they were saying, because in pure race pace, man, they were right on. Once they pit, they maintained that distance to Mercedes for the end of the race. So Mercedes and Ferrari seem to have very, very similar race pace, which bodes really, really well for Ferrari. Now, Ferrari is still battling whatever ridiculous strategy decisions, they just can't shake it. They've gotten new strategists, and they just cannot make the right calls when it comes to strategy. Um, so that was really, really a bummer for Ferrari, starting off so strong, and then to just get caught out with strategy was a really, really big bummer. But there were a lot of positives. If you're a Ferrari fan, there are a lot of positives looking at this. Even though they got third and fourth, there were a lot of really good things that came out of this weekend. I mean, they've shown that they can hang with Mercedes, which looked the clear in a way favorites for this. So props to Ferrari. And even at the end of the race, Lewis said that the car is fun to drive. The car is fun to drive. And if Lewis is saying that the car is fun to drive, that really, really says something, because when the Mercedes car was fun to drive for him, he was winning all those races and winning all those championships. Um, so that I think that in and of itself, what Lewis said about the Ferrari at the end of the race should bode really, really well for Ferrari fans. As I'm a Ferrari fan, I feel good in finishing this race. I feel good with this race weekend for Ferrari. It's definitely a win considering the season that we had last year. Um, if we're going to talk about Ferrari, we got to start with Charles' start, going from fourth to first. That was insane. Just an incredible start from him. Yeah, that was a lot of fun for Ferrari fans. Talking about a couple other things. Audi, despite Nico Hulkenberg retiring, Bortoleto ran a great race. I think Audi looks really strong. I made a TikTok video the other day that I had Audi predicted to finish last this year. Obviously, with Aston Martin's drama, I think they will. But I think Audi is going to have a pretty strong season this year. So props to them for having a really good race. I feel really good for Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hulkenberg. I think this will be a fun season to watch for them. Um, Cadillac, definitely the new kids on the block. Even though they got Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez driving for them, which incredible drivers. They just this weekend was first race weekend woes as a new team. Valtteri, DNFing and Sergio finishing towards the back. He didn't finish last, but I think he was second to last of the running cars. So definitely lot of new for them. I think that's going to be pretty common for this season. I'm not totally worried about the new team because, I've said this multiple times, but Cadillac is owned by GM, which GM is an American Motors company. It's General Motors. That's the largest car company in the world. So they definitely have the money. They definitely have the backing. I think it'll take some time for them to become competitive, because every new team in Formula One, unless with the exception of Braun, which that was a complete anomaly. With the exception of Braun, I mean, every single team that we've seen in recent Formula One history starts out not doing great. Most recently, Haas, when they joined the grid, they didn't do very well either. So I think this is going to be a pretty common for this year. I think they may have one, maybe two races where we see some really strong finishes for one or the other driver. But yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty common thing for them. I'm not too worried about it as a Formula One team. They definitely got the backing, they've got the money, but yeah, this is going to be a slow year for them. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk about, Arvid Lindblad. What a weekend for you, sir. Hats off to you. Hats off to you, young man. Yeah, what a great weekend. Managed to get himself all the way up to fifth. Was it fifth place at the start of the race? um, and managed to stay up in the points the whole time. Really, really great weekend from him. He looks strong. I think this will be a really good season for him. If he can keep doing what he's been doing, man, he's a really strong driver, and I'm really excited for him. What a performance! So hats off to you, Arvid Lindblad. That you looked great this weekend. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk about, Red Bull and McLaren definitely look to be uh, behind Mercedes and Ferrari. I think right now Mercedes and Ferrari are definitely the top two. In that order, Mercedes then Ferrari. They definitely look to be the top two. But Red Bull and McLaren, they looked a little bit slower than those two teams this weekend, at least during the race. Um, I think having Isaac Hadjar qualify third was really, really great. I think, um, which I'll talk about Isaac Hadjar and Red Bull specifically in a minute, but was really good. But overall, I think in terms of raw race pace, I think that Ferrari and Mercedes are the top two. But um, there are a couple things that we can't totally say that just yet because Max Verstappen was out in Q1. He had to start towards the back. I think had he been able to qualify in Q3, I think he would have been right there at the front. And Oscar Piastri wasn't able to start the race because he crashed on his way to the grid. So we didn't see, only one McLaren was racing, and Red Bull's Max Verstappen had to start at the back. So I think it was an uncharacteristic showing for those two teams for this race. If they can get both drivers, qualifying where we think they can qualify up into Q3, I think the competition would be a lot closer. And I may even say that one of those teams could have an edge over Ferrari. But right now, just purely based off of the Australian Grand Prix, it looks to be that Ferrari and Mercedes are the top two, with McLaren and Red Bull behind them. Once we get to China is the next race that we will go to. And hopefully we can get a better idea in China where the pecking order actually is, if we can get both Red Bull and both McLarens in Q3 up towards the front at the start of the race. Speaking of Red Bull, I want to also talk about Isaac Hadjar. So Isaac Hadjar, before I talk about Isaac Hadjar, Isaac Hadjar is in the second Red Bull seat. If you look back on Red Bull's history with second seats, they have had a rough go of it since like 2019 with Pierre Gasly. Started that. Pierre Gasly was promoted. He was quickly dropped, replaced with Alex Albon. Alex Albon had a really strong end to the season. 2020, Alex Albon was then replaced by Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez had a good 2021 season. He was then replaced, and then by, I believe it was Liam Lawson replaced him. And then Liam Lawson was then replaced by Yuki Tsunoda. And now Yuki Tsunoda has been replaced by Isaac Hadjar. So it has been a revolving door of second drivers. And I was hoping that with Adrian Newey, Helmut Marko, and Christian Horner no longer in control of Red Bull, I was hoping, and I predicted in a previous TikTok that I made, that the second seat for Red Bull would no longer be a curse. They were going to design a car built for both drivers, and that way both drivers could be competitive. And right now, that looks to be the case. I mean, unfortunately, Isaac Hadjar had to retire from the race due to a mechanical issue, but he qualified third and ran a really strong race up until he unfortunately had to retire. So if based off of I'm really bummed for Isaac. He wasn't able to finish the race, but if I were him, I'd feel really confident about this season. That car, it looks based off of what I've seen, it looks easier to drive. And I think Isaac is going to have a much easier time driving that car than his predecessors in that second seat. So I feel really confident for Isaac. I think this is going to be a much better season for Red Bull, because I think that car is just going to be easier to drive for both drivers, not just Max. And that's been my biggest issue with Red Bull in the past, is they only design the cars for Max, and they get on the second drivers for not performing. It's like, well, Max has a very particular driving style. His driving style and the way he likes his car setup is unlike any other driver on the Formula One grid. And so when that car is specifically designed for him, of course the second driver is not going to perform well because they don't have Max's driving style, and that car is only set up for Max. It's not set up for those second drivers. So of course they were going to fail. They were put in a position to fail. And they were blamed for that. The drivers were blamed for being put in the position that of failing. And I hated that for them. I hated that for Pierre. I hated that for Alex. I hated that for Sergio. I hated that for Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda. I just hated that for them. And they were the ones that were blamed, which that's not a good way to run a team. That's not how you run a team. I saw a clip this weekend of Toto Wolff talking with Kimi Antonelli after Kimi Antonelli's crash in one of the practice sessions. And just the way that he was talking to Kimi about, hey, like essentially what it was like, hey, these are the things that went wrong. Okay. But hey, you're good. You're learning. He was encouraging Kimi Antonelli, and Kimi Antonelli was like, I just had a lot of confidence in the car. And Toto was like, don't lose that. Keep being confident. Keep being confident in the car. And just, it's really encouraging to see Toto talk to him, like as a team principal, talking to your drivers. The drivers need to know that someone has their back. And if they're constantly looking over their shoulders, like the second drivers at Red Bull, they're never going to be successful. And I think that has bred a really successful formula at Mercedes. And that's why Kimi Antonelli, for being so young, is succeeding really, really well at Mercedes. Yes, he is an incredibly talented driver, but he has the confidence because he has the backing. They're going to support him even when he fails. So that was my biggest gripe with Red Bull. And why when it was Sebastian Vettel winning all those races, dude, I was the biggest Red Bull fan. And everything, but I became really disenfranchised with the team after seeing second driver after second driver just get kicked to the curb because of their own incompetence of building a car designed for both drivers. So I feel great for Isaac. I feel gutted that he wasn't able to finish this race, but I think it's going to be a great season for him. And I think it's going to be a really good season for Red Bull because obviously, looking at Max, yeah, he started at the back, but he made it up into the points and had a really, really great run during the race. So props to Red Bull. The last thing I want to kind of talk about is kind of going back to where we started on these new regulations. There were a lot of retirements, lot of retirements this race. I know I mentioned it before. I think these new regulations, it's going to get better. So Formula One fans that are watching, especially the hardcore fans that are watching this season, don't turn off your TVs. Don't skip watching the races just yet. It's the first race. I think as the teams and the drivers start to understand the battery more, I think racing will get better. And if it truly is bad enough, I'm hoping that the FIA will be like, okay, we need to change this. We need to change how we do this. We need to change the formula, all this kind of stuff. And they might do that. But today we had Valtteri Bottas retired, Isaac Hadjar retired, Nico Hulkenberg. I don't even think he started. They all retired. Fernando Alonso, he ended up retiring. Somehow Lance Stroll, I think finished the race. I think it was like 12 or 13 laps down. I think he finished the race. But yeah, we had a lot of retirements this race. Now that's usually pretty common for first race. New season, new cars, new power units. I mean, I was pretty much expecting to have a lot of those retirements. But yeah, we had a lot of retirements this race, which not great. But again, I really do think the reliability will get better once all the teams kind of understand these power units. They're able to develop them, and everything will kind of get better. So I think all that will work itself out. All right, Formula One fans. Well, that's pretty much it on the Australian Grand Prix. It was, I thought personally, I thought it was a great race. I really enjoyed watching it from start to finish. It was awesome. There were some great battles, from the front all the way to the back. I really thought it was entertaining. Again, I think this bodes really well for the new regulations in terms of the raceability of the cars. Um, which I was surprised. I'm not gonna lie. I was surprised. I was hesitant in my confidence of the new regulations and how it would be and how the race would go. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching the race. Now it's only race one. And Australia is a very particular track. So once we get into kind of the really get the season going, especially once we get into the dog days, into summer like May, June, July, those races in there, I think we'll have a. I mean, I don't think we will have a much better idea of, what these new cars are like. But so far, I think this was a great first race. And to just kind of cap on that little statistic of the raceability, last year the Australian Grand Prix there were 45 overtakes throughout the entire race. This year there were 120. So that's a very very hardcore statistic to prove, like, hey, look, yes, here's the proof that these cars are better for racing this year. So as a fan it looked better. Now for the drivers, I know they have their complaints, which are 100% valid, totally fine, but as a fan, this race was fun to watch. I really enjoyed it. I'm sad the first race weekend of the season is over, but we get to look ahead to the next Formula One race, which is in China. So until then,